Caledonian elixir. Broadcasting from Glasgow, Scotland, this is the Caledonian Elixir. I'm your host, Vincent Lawler, and you can get involved by calling free from the UK on 0738 745 3353. That is 0738 745 3353. The international number is also on the screen, or you can click the link in the description. And once you do that, just follow the simple instructions, or you can leave a live chat and engage with us that way. And whether you agree or disagree, it's free. So click the link, call in, and join the discussion. And we are live on several platforms: YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, Twitter X, and we'll be up as a podcast on Spotify later. And I was having some technical issues there in my intro, so I hope it all went smoothly. I can't really tell at the moment. And if you want to support us, you can go to Buy Me a Coffee. There is a link in the description on the YouTube channel there. There's also a PayPal link if you want to be generous. So, welcome. I hope you're all well today. And on the Elixir, we have a guest who I'll be bringing on in a minute. But to all of you finding us for the first time, we're a burgeoning call-in show covering everything from politics to the paranormal, told with wit and true grit, with callers and guests. Now, our guest today is an author, podcaster. She's coming on to speak to us about spirituality, science, consciousness, and reality. She's an interesting woman with a lot of fascinating ideas. So, without further ado, Yssah.
Hi,
Hello,
Vincent.
Yssah, can you hear me?
I'm very happy to be here in your podcast. Thank you for having me.
Can you tell me, was the intro fine? Did it stream okay?
Yeah, if I can hear you well, you said?
Did the intro stream okay? The
Yes,
intro video?
yes,
There,
yes.
there was a lagging on my end, and as I said to you before the show, I'm not certain if it's the computer or what. So if there's a bit of disruption, apologies. So good to speak with you. So where in the world exactly are you joining us from?
Well, currently I'm in Mexico,
Mexico.
close to Mexico City. Yes,
Nice, nice.
yes.
And when I watch a lot of your, in fact, could you just describe a bit about yourself, your background, and your channel?
Sure, my pleasure. Well, as Vincent was saying, I very much speak. I'm a speaker. I'm author of books in Spanish and in English. I give online courses, uh, private sessions. Um, I design clothes and jewelry based on codes that I translate. That's how I began this path, translating codes. And when I talk about codes, I refer to very specific geometries in which the way that the symbols that you use, the language that you use, the structure emits a very specific frequency that is embedded, whether if it's in your biology or actually it's coming from other dimensions. And of course, it's also embedded in your DNA. Yet for a very specific purpose, it's important for us to connect with very specific patterns of creation. And as this reality was configured through codes, and I'm not talking about binary codes 1 and 0, like, yes, it was configured this way. However, when we want to reach to source, then bringing it higher tech codes involving geometries, colors, light language, and so forth, then actually enable our inner channel to that source, because then we start to speak that language, because the universal language is geometry. So I do that through jewelry, through clothes, through the books that I write. I have a way of approaching reality. I call it unified science and spirituality, because for like throughout my path, for instance, I had lived in very specific parts of the world, like in Egypt. I was there for 4 years, and I connect very much to ancient civilizations. So the more that I tune into all that information that we ourselves encrypted at that very specific coordinate in space time, then we know that science and spirituality is not isolated from one another at all. Actually, the way that we used to look at it, and even if we consider that time is non-linear and that all those timelines about Atlantis, Lemuria, Hyperborea, and so forth are simultaneously coexisting, then we know that we consider science and spirituality as one, and even more, just going off Earth, if we talk about the galactic community and so forth, all that language is precise, all that knowledge, precisely that level of acknowledgement of what information is, bridges science and spirituality as one.
Now, when I watch your content online, you weave many strands of spirituality and science. However, the 20th century is replete with scientists who utilize what was considered the realm of spirituality for the purpose of control and power. You know, think of the mind control scientists of the CIA who operated like 20th century dark sorcerers who used a repertoire of hallucinogenics, hypnosis, sensory deprivation in order to destroy, then recreate the psyche or the spirit. But unlike the Siberian or like the Patagonian shaman, the importance of ritualistic setting or the sacrament of psychedelics is absent with these guys. Again, these ancient spiritual practices were twisted and used by these MK Ultra artichoke sciences, but you believe that science and spirituality are natural counterparts that overlap together. Could you speak to how you try to marry science and spirituality?
Well, for instance, just to say one example, when we are talking about that point that we reach after hours and hours and hours of intense meditation, as the monks do, in very specific monasteries like Tibet, or other parts in Asia, or Middle East, Europe, and so forth, in order to access to that state of full, call it mindfulness, call it, that void, the way to approach to it from the way to look at it from a scientific approach is actually the 0 point field, accessing to your 0 point energy. So, and this is where it gets really interesting and
Sorry,
important.
sorry for interrupting. Who was
Yeah.
the physicist who theorized the concept of 0 point energy? Was it Laszlo something like that? Can you remember or recall the name of the physicist?
Well, I know that Max Planck, was very much involved, not only with the 0 point energy, yet also with the black hole technology. So I know that he was one of the pioneers on that.
Yeah, I
That's
recall. I recall Planck saying, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative of consciousness." So he was definitely on board with the idea of a consciousness-centric reality.
Yes, like for instance, speaking about scientists, there is a dear friend of mine, Nassim Haramein, that I truly honor his path and everything that he has come through, which is very much related to free energy. So the way that he addresses to consciousness is when the 0 point field is relating with the boundaries of the space-time fabric. You know, you have the 0 point field, which is that would what would we call that void, you know, that wholeness. And then as this 0 point field interacts with the boundaries of the space memory network, which is the akasha, which is where all the information is stored, when that void touches those boundaries, it creates consciousness. In other words, what would it be if we bring it to spiritual terms? It would be when you reach that void, you get clarity, you receive clarity, you
Mm.
have that epiphanies that then you say, oh, then that's what they mean, or oh, then the universe is like that, because you're coming from that stillness. And it's not that your body is fully still, it is actually that, because even if I'm sitting, my body is generating energy at a cosmic level. My mitochondria is generating electric current as from equivalent to thunders, to electric thunders.
Could
So
you could you describe mitochondria? Because I'm aware it's I've heard it's something synonymous with the like the nuclear power of the cells, the power source. Am I correct?
yes, that's one aspect of them. And you know, just before going there, I just want to say to your audience that perhaps if you're not very much related to you know, all these scientific topics, you might think that this is not quite fundamental in your reality. The thing is that when we understand, when we comprehend how our biology functions, then we can communicate with it at a more intimate level. So
Hmm.
having said that, and it will respond, you know, you can actually command your biology through. This is how reality was warped. You know, this is why when you go to ancient texts, they say, it's almost like, for instance, the Sefer Yetzirah, which is this very ancient encoded book, encrypted, and it says like almost step one for creation, step one this, step two, because it's not like like we are as if like computers work, but the thing is that universe likes order, you
Well,
know.
sorry, can you repeat the name of that book?
Yeah, Sefer Yetzirah. It's
And where right, sorry.
I'm sorry, what do you say?
I was going to just ask where was that written? Who wrote that?
Okay, so like nobody knows who wrote it in the beginning because it was so hidden that then, you know, it just the first edition of it just appeared, but with non-author, or none that I, or not that I know about,
Hmm.
you know. But there have been other authors that have translated it in different languages, like in English, and then you can have a very good access to the main information of it, because there are some editions that are actually, you know, like not full, they don't get the full spectrum of the message. But you know, so through this like manual of step one, step two, we can do that to our body, with our body communicate at that level, and the body will respond, the power of manifestation of the bread of life through our worth. So about the mitochondria, these power sources, commonly known as power sources, sources, are actually the brain of our cells. Why? Because they choose which cell will be activated and which cell they will deactivate. So that powerful they are. This is why when our mitochondria are healthy, our whole biology is healthy, because our cells are functioning properly. And therefore, in each role that every cell is involved on. So the mitochondria also are very much involved with our body creating this 0 point energy. And again, I just want to clarify, Zero point energy is equivalent in the outside, like accessing to that free energy. That's how important it is. Because once we are capable to harness our zero point energy, like from a state of awareness, then we're talking about generating that sovereignty over our energy
Mm.
due to all the implications that are connected with being capable of creating our own zero point energy. Because then you're committing to your biology, how it functions, breath work, focus, a very specific type of discipline, brain waves. So you're summing and bringing together all those aspects that innerly you are being required to keep the ethics with your own biology.
You alluded to mitochondria being an energy source, and it can choose what cells to activate and deactivate. Is mitochondria its own intelligence, or do we affect it and determine what cells it activates or deactivates?
Well, this is a very good question. Like mitochondria, they have a different DNA from our cell. So we have two different DNAs, the one that our cells have and the ones that the mitochondria have. Now, where does this mitochondria come from? And this is a very interesting theory, which is the panspermia theory, that says that in the ocean of the world, before all life began, there were these bacteria that were underwater. They were anaerobic. They couldn't be communing with the oxygen because for them it was toxic. So
Mm.
then along came other bacteria that were aerobic, like they were adapted to that oxygen. So then when they became together, they created this process of symbiosis, and then they became one, an eukaryote cell. And that communion of those two bodies is the result of the cells that we have right now.
Mm.
So we have, let's say, like the galactic DNA that the mitochondria have, and that actually in the beginning they were 805 genes. Today we only have active 37 genes. It's the same like with the DNA. We have the RNA and the DNA, and the RNA was considered as this junk DNA, like very badly addressed. But the thing is that that is our potential DNA, the dormant genes, where we
Mhm.
can access actually to all those um, multidimensional aspects of ourselves ever since life was created here. And so, following with the mitochondria is generating, just that you have an idea, and this is what I was talking about, the electric current, the thunder. As I am sitting right now in what would be like a very rested position, my mitochondria, each mitochondria is generating at a second, nanosecond, cosmic energy equivalent to all these thunders, this electric current. So if you ask why are some factions harvesting from our energy, it's because we are creating cosmic amounts of energy. Cosmic
See,
amounts.
sorry, see when you say cosmic energy, can you describe that? What do you mean exactly?
Sure, sure. At a macrocosmic way, to be more specific. Thank you for saying that. Macrocosmic. So I'm talking about like black hole tech, like if you say that the sun, another example, is creating teravolts of energy, we are creating terahertz. So we are creating the same unit, just at different levels.
Mm.
But when it comes to the mitochondria, they are literally generating macrocosmic amounts of energy in our body. This is why capabilities like any type of psionics, telekinesis, telepathy, clairvoyance, teleportations, and so forth is not only a science fiction probability. It is.
Yeah, and I do want to get to psi phenomena a little bit later with you.
Okay, what would you like to talk about?
Okay, well, in fact, before I get to that, I'd like to just play a short clip for you from a
Sure.
movie you're probably well familiar with, because who isn't?
This is the world that you know. The world as it was at the end of the 20th century. It exists now only as part of a neural interactive simulation that we call the Matrix. You've been living in a dream world, Neo.
That was a awesome movie, and I can't believe it was released over 25 years ago now.
All right.
I know, I know. But look, it's not just movies promoting ideas like we exist in a simulation. You have titans of industry such as Elon Musk, physicists such as David Bohm, who theorized that all matter and consciousness is part of a simulation. Therefore, the information of every thought is reflected throughout the simulation, as thoughts are not just contained in our heads, but rather our thoughts are, they write the code of our shared information. So the notion of the ideas of precognition, clairvoyance, telekinesis, that ties into the notion that we're in a simulation, and I want to get to that in a couple of minutes. But before I do, what are your views on the simulation model? Do you think we exist as part of a simulation?
Yes, I do. I do remember, and how I experience it is that the reality that we get to experience is hybrid, which by this I mean organic and inorganic. So the inorganic part that people perceive as a simulation, which is was created through the holographic field, it was also created through AI, not by
Mm,
AI, not by AI, which is different, but AI was used. This is why that part, that inorganic part, that simulation part comes from. Nevertheless, and this is where it gets even more interesting, because for instance, if we say, okay, are we living in a hologram? Yes, we are. Otherwise, capabilities as teleportation and other psionics wouldn't be possible. Why? Because how could we compact our matter, our mass, into the quantum spectrum, into the quantum tunneling, all the way to project myself from here into other place? The other way, this is why like most of the times, or most humanity is like, okay, you do your suitcase, you prepare your suitcase, you take the airplane, and then you travel somewhere, or you take your car and then you travel somewhere, because that is how they taught us that we are living in a 3D. So
mm,
the more that we are fixed to this belief, the more that we are ralentizing, that we are decreasing the potency of our vehicle of light. Why? Because this even is shown in the tree of life, in all those blueprints of creation, where the geometries, and mainly, for instance, actually, let's say the tree of life. With do you have you seen the tree of life of the Kabbalah with the
yeah,
sphere?
yeah. With Malkuth and Kiefer at the, is it Kiefer at the top and Malkuth at the bottom, or is it the other way about?
Malkuth is on the bottom.
Yes.
Yes, and Kether is on the top. So
Yeah.
with those, what they are talking about, where they are pointing out to, is that each sphere is a voxel that is located in the third dimension. So you imagine that before, like whoever created this reality, this part of the simulation, you get very specific algorithmic codes. What does this mean? That there is this reality, the simulation works through probability.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is probability? Loops. The amount of loops that create resonance with one another in order to create an automatic reality. You know, when you're involved in throughout your lifetime, and then you see yourself, you caught yourself repeating very specific patterns of behavior. Why? Because you are, well, when this happens is that mostly you could be, let's say, you could be automatically responding, let's say like an autopilot responding to very specific information, and you're just being drawn by the algorithm of the matrix,
Mm-hmm.
just being drawn by the algorithm of the matrix, like. But that's when we're talking about awakening, because that's when you say, okay, so my body does not function through algorithm. That's why we are capable to create ripples in time, because that's how we access to memory. And I can explain that to you at a quantum physics level, at a biological level, how we create those ripples in time and accessing therefore to memory, remember. But when we don't remember, then we're going through autopilot and just being ran by those algorithms of the simulated reality. So there are parts of this reality that are organic, like the crystals, like the mountains, like, like all those places where you connect deeply with your spirit. And there are all those other parts that were actually created to keep people.
We are getting someone who want Colin. I think they want to ask you a question, sir.
Okay.
Hello. I don't know what happened there. They hanged up. Do you know what? I'm going to turn that off because that was quite annoying. I usually have it in vibrate and then connect it after, and they can come on and ask the question. So
Oh, okay.
anyway, continue, please.
So, for instance, as I was saying, then the other parts that I refer to as inorganic, then
Mhm.
those are the harvesting control systems that are focused on sucking the energy of people and then relocating it to very specific, let's say, matrices, submatrices, um, interfaces that feed very specific purposes to continue to keep the humanity locked in that sleeping state.
Do you know what? There's a. Have you ever heard of the Roko's basilisk?
No, I haven't.
Roko's basilisk originated in an online forum back in 2010, and it's a thought experiment suggesting that a super intelligent artificial intelligence that will be created in the future is retroactively affecting the past to ensure its creation. And it has also created our reality, this simulation in the future. And because our universe is information based, it can transcend space and time and affect us. And it will affect us negatively if we act in any way that will act against its engendering, its creation. And it will reward people in the past um, that ensure its development and creation. Um, it's something I find quite interesting that it's not exactly a Terminator scenario, such as machines being sent back in time, because in this scenario, time doesn't actually exist. Time and space are outdated concepts of the 20th century. But the notion that an advanced artificial intelligence that is to be created very soon can affect the past is something I find very interesting. What do you
It
think about that?
Yes, it is quite interesting. Well, for me, um, as you said, like how we perceive what time is or space is in a very localized way. And actually, in order to access to the quantum, is in a non-localized form, which means that the distance doesn't exist.
Mhm.
So, and time is just about the intermittence in which light beams, like if it's a repeated intermittence, how long it takes to be repeated again. So it's just mainly intermittence that we get to classify in cycles, but it's just about light beaming, interconnecting at the quantum level, at the holographic level. So now,
Mhm.
based on what you were saying, this translated into a hologram and this reality being created through that technology. um, like there are many theories. And for me, something that I really want to point out is that in the end, or in the beginning, we are so powerful that we create our reality at every moment. If we're coming from a space of coherence. If I'm saying this, I'm thinking that, I'm acting in another way, as much as I say, or as much as I think, I like the manifestation, if it's not aligned, it will show that. However, if I'm showing that alignment, that's how I will come through, how my manifestation will come through. So having said this, if these beings created that through that technology, this reality, and they're coming back and forward, through the spatial temporal constants, or through, let's say, spatial luminescent constants, and then granting golden nuggets to people that from the past are actually opening the field for them to be and coming into a higher. How I can relate it is like how time travel devices work, and how they are fighting over them, very specific countries, very specific groups, because whoever is in control of the spatiotemporal constants or timelines or field of probabilities is actually, ruling, because then regardless of what other people do, they will just keep on correcting or shifting the outcome because they are accessing to that technology. Nevertheless, as I was saying, we're so powerful that with all the ripples in time that we are capable to generate at every nanosecond, because this is how our brain functions. This is how we remember, by creating ripples in time. Our neurons are coming together through that synaptic process, through quantum entanglement, and creating ripples in time. If I'm aware of that, I can actually communicate with my neurons and say, okay, I want to remember this. For every synapses that will come through these labs through these labs, I will focus to restore the memory related to this. And then you focus your energy on that. You give yourself a specific moment to meditate on that, and you harness your energy on that. So regardless whether if this theory is true or not, whether if another theory is true or not, what is important is how we approach to ourselves. Yes, it is important to know about all of that is outside, to take it into consideration. However, the outcome depends on us always.
You've said that, you've mentioned that the probabilities, the outcomes, and to me, it appears that your outlook on it um, transcends or isn't the linear Cartesian sequential model of time, as in cause in effect, one moment proceeds after another. You were alluding to, at least I interpreted it as an allusion to perhaps parallel outcomes that exist at once. You know, and you get theories like that, like the multiverse of quantum, um, quantum theory. Is that what you're alluding to? That we don't really exist in a linear Cartesian sequential universe, but we exist outside of that, and there are many probabilities and outcomes. Is that what you were?
Yes, yes. And for instance, now what field of but yet, however, as I was also saying, when we're talking about the infinite field of probabilities and how, for instance, technology approaches to that is through algorithms. So a very specific number is being repeated, a very specific code is repeated. Okay, so then it will be run in 3 rounds. Why? Because the algorithms, the mathematics are throwing that number. It's like statistics. However, when it comes to consciousness, we are capable to, in our brain, at a quantum level, be creating those ripples in time, but other factions know about this. This is why they use the MK Ultra, because for every ripple in time, they are guiding it to something specific. But yet, what happens if we are aware of that? Then we are owning our own ripples in time. Therefore, we are coming together to create a ripple in time that is in resonance to our evolution. And I'm just talking about one, but these are million happening at a time. This is again, and choosing what we will be remembering of and not. And this is where the field of infinite probabilities come. What you were asking. For instance, let's say, okay, so based on my past or based on the past of humanity, it's very much likely that a very specific story will repeat. Why? Because throughout all those tests, the story has always been the same. That's what the algorithm says. However, if we look at it from this very like empowered aspect, we will say, okay, so regardless that, we can access to that coordinate in the space memory network where we actually chose what led to something negative. Let's just focalize that point of choice, that moment of choice. And now we are apparently in the future, which is the present. If we are looking at us from that past, we are in the future, right? But we are actually in the present. The moment that we come here to this point to focalize our energy where we made the wrong choice, when we are there already, we are becoming the past, like the future is becoming the past. So this is why time is non-linear at all. And this is where the paradoxes come, and this is where topology finds its answers. Because we can, through our brain and our plasma field, we are capable to project our energy to any point in time, any point in the space memory network, and to create those ripples, So for the ones that doesn't know what ripples are, is when you're bringing two different bodies, which in this case would be yourself from the past and yourself from the present, and you're interacting with each other. So that creates disturbances in the space memory network. So as you're mirroring in one another, you're creating that consciousness, that awareness. So then it starts to create those ripples in time. And then you create a new memory, which is not a new memory, it's just a new timeline that you're activating. I hope that I made myself clear. I know that
Yeah,
it's
and you said the idea of probability or potential outcome is something that it really reminds me of cybernetics, artificial intelligence, computing. It reminds me of Albert Turing because I remember he used to write a lot about that. You know, he was a big name back in the day when it came to cybernetics. And just to remind everyone, Turing theorized that the human nervous system is an information processing machine um, that the human nervous system processes reality and that thought itself, memory, is data processing. So when you think of your family, when you think of a memory that of being somewhere with your friend the other day, again, that's data processing in your brain. And I think our view of reality is changing to something similar to Turing's because nowadays we're always buried. We're always looking in our phones, our smartphones, our laptops, our computers. And therefore, that 20th century view of space and time is becoming like a cultural artifact replaced uh, by an information based sort of simulation model because if you think about it, if you if we're always using our smartphones like every hour, practically we're on a smartphone for something. Well, we shouldn't be, but we are. And if you're typing something into Google or YouTube, it brings information associated with your search. It transcends that linear Cartesian sequential space time and it replaces it with association. So if you were to type in something in YouTube about aliens, it'll bring up something associated with your search outside of time. So what do you think about that idea of the notion of attraction or the law of attraction or the law of association shaping our lives?
well, I how I experience it is that it's not just one layer, you know, as I was saying, that it's not just about just saying, okay, I want this, you know, and you put like your heart and you say it. If there is not coherence in the rest of your body, whether it's your heart, your
Sorry
head,
about
your,
that.
yeah.
On you jumping about, it's quite distracting. You know. I
Sorry.
don't know. Could you hear her throughout the episode? Like she's been meowing every couple of minutes, and
Yeah,
I'm
she
always
wants
trying
to
to.
give her message. So
Yeah, she wants to be part of the show. You know, she's a executive producer.
yeah. Well, you've got a nice crew there because I can see her potential, absolutely.
Definitely got potential.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, as I was saying, if, for instance, let's summarize the three main epicenters in our body that actually create those uh, like brainstorms, you know, like they are responsible of our thoughts. It would be the gut brain, the heart brain, and the brain. So for instance, if your brain is not aligned with your gut brain, then regardless, as much as your heart brain and your brain are aligned, there will be a slight decoherence in the field. So your level of manifestation will also be influenced by that. If your three brains are aligned, then your magnetic field is going to respond remarkably. What does this mean? That it's not like you are going to bring in, you know, like magnetizing it literally, like evidently. Yet your magnetic field is going to create the resonance, the specific resonance that which you want to manifest has, because our body, our multidimensional body is so efficient that within you, that which you want to manifest has already happened or is already happening in a very specific timeline. Therefore, that information is within you. So you just need to access within your DNA, within the space-time fabric, to that timeline where that has already been manifested or is currently being manifested. Align your brains and start to magnetize through your field that information in that timeline, that spatiotemporal constant, and bring it connecting through your three brains.
So are you saying that the way we know if our three brains are aligned is if is our success in manifesting what we want in the world?
Yes. I know it sounds like very, like grounded or, like perhaps not a very illuminated idea, yet it's simple and it is. And I'll tell you why.
Well, common sense is usually the most illuminating idea that is out there. Things based on common sense because, sorry, go on.
It's okay. Like, for instance, the gut brain, we have neurons in our guts. We have neurons. And those neurons, the name are mostly pyramidal neurons. Why? Because they have the shape of a pyramid. In our heart, we have neurons. So, and the same pyramidal neurons, other type of neurons as well, but let's focalize in the pyramidal neurons because this has to do with the pyramidal tech. This is why the pyramids were so important because they show to us the capability of coherent, the possible level of coherence that can be achieved through pyramidal networks. And in our brain, guess what? We also have pyramidal neurons that are the ones mainly in the area of the hippocampus where we activate our memories. Again, when I say memory, I'm not talking about recalling something, just, like, oh, yeah, who you were in your past lifetime or who you were. No, I'm talking about all informational field. It's data, it's memory.
Hmm.
Now, when if for instance if your gut brain has fear, is perceiving fear, because we also energetically, as we once were connected through our umbilical cord to our mother before coming into this world, there are also energetic cordons that connect, umbilical cords that connect us to this cube, which is this simulation matrix.
Yeah, that is um, that Saturnian cube that we but you it's apparently a symbol for the simulation that we are all a part of, and that I have viewed videos on YouTube that explain it and describe it quite succinctly. But myself, I haven't really studied it, so I'm not familiar with the symbolism and the meaning of it that much. But I have seen the cube represented in media over and over again with occultism, even with like shows like Star Trek, and you have the Borg, and they come in a big cube, and they can take over you and assimilate you, and therefore you will now exist as part of this hive consciousness inside a cube. And could you describe that for me, if you're aware of the notion of the Saturnian cube, and how it relates to simulation theory?
Sure. Well, when we see the cube, it mainly has seven directions, not six. Six directions, let's say linearly speaking, which is above, below, in front, behind, right, left. You have then the six faces of a cube. The seventh is the center. This is why the magical seven, the alchemical seven. So, what happens? When you want to condense a reality, yes, you can use any geometry. And I'm not even talking about platonic solids. I'm talking about any type of geometry because everything is information again. However, what's the difference with the cube? The cube the thing is that its potential, let's say we have the cube and we have the hypercube. So the cube is the compressed potential. The hypercube is the kinetic expression of it. And even though each one has its potential and kinetic, I'm just talking about in order so that to compare it in a simpler form. So when the cube is closed, it's an incubation. It is the way that you compress and condense information and keeping it in a very low frequency, which is barely in motion. The higher the density that we're moving through, the higher the speed.
Mhm.
So in the cube, it's going slow. Why? Because then, and this is how this reality is functioning. You see, the people is like fast, 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 going to work, going to this, then resting, eating, like that, like very fast, because it requires from a lot of energy to sustain this reality, because the boundaries of that cube are super slow. So then people have to do, like humanity going fast in order to sustain those boundaries. Now, when the hypercube activates, which is the transcendent, we can call it like the Christic consciousness, which is when the cube opens, which is the pattern of the cross. Actually, if you want to create a cross, if you want to create a cube out of paper, you will see in the diagram that you need to cross to cut across. So that's embedded in the Da Vinci Vitruvius Man. That is embedded in the Jesus Christ. This is embedded in many forms. That is going out of that incubation. When that happens, it's because you're already moving forward into the next dimension, which is moving from a 3D to a 4D. So then,
And am I correct? Sorry, am I correct that the meaning of Christ in Greek is awakening?
Christos, yes.
It's awakening, isn't it?
I'm familiar with the word Christos and how you
Christos.
pronounce it, but not the precise etymology of it. So
But I just want to play another short clip, and it is it's connected to what we're talking about in a way with how we are in a simulation and how we are being controlled and our information is being controlled. It's something I just got online, and I think it's quite self-explanatory but interesting in and of itself. So one second.
yes,
The elites at the top of the pyramid have known this information for millennia. Using the power of collective consciousness, they program this reality as they please to carry out their plans and agendas. They program reality, and we execute it. That is their power, the power that lies in knowledge. This is why this information is so valuable and has been deliberately hidden from the general public for centuries. They have power over us to the extent that we ignore the illusory and programmable nature of this reality. And we have power when we acquire the knowledge that this is not the ultimate reality, and that, essentially, we are eternal beings and the co-creators of this reality. They use both your individual creative ability and that of the collective to materialize their agendas, which explains the overwhelming presence of propaganda. Politicians and media constantly recite lies, aware of the power of repetition. They know that by repeating something enough times, a seed will be planted in the subconscious of.
And for all of you listening, thinking this sounds too out there, that physicist I mentioned earlier, Yampolsky, no, it was Bohm, but Yampolsky is another who think that the simulation model also explains psychic phenomena. You've got synchronicity, precognition, remote viewing, and as the basis of our universe, that information that we can receive and transmit to one another. Even the National Institute for Health they conducted, they're the main, one of the main medical organizations in the United States, and of the US government, and they undertook a study on the healing power of prayer. It concluded in controlled randomized trials that prayer has improved outcomes for our health and our existence. And again, to me, that's evidence of the power of association and attraction.
Yes. Yes. As you were saying, like all these fundamental forms of creation were given hundreds of years ago. Even in the ancient texts, there are there. The thing is that they skipped some parts of the information. Like for instance, in the Bible, when it says "ask and it will be given," they didn't put "ask" as if it's there. I'm saying it in other words, of course, but they removed that part, like "ask" as if it's already there and you will receive. Because this part, if you go deep, is telling you about how I perceive it, what I was talking about, which is in another timeline, in another spatiotemporal constant, that is already happening. When you connect with your heart to that timeline, to that probability, then you're bringing it alive into this one, you know? And then you can also say, okay, so then you won't be afraid that you will mess it up, that you won't be good enough, because you know that in that other reality you already are. So you have the codes, you have the information within, you have already accomplished it. And that is when your gut brain is not feeling fear anymore, when your heart is fully expanded, when your brain says, okay, let's go, and then you manifest.
That sounds a little bit like, it's not exactly this, but it sounds a little bit like epigenetics, that we have the ability based on our past to change our DNA.
Yes. And it's also similar to what you were saying about this theory, like going into the past and influencing people to act on behalf of these groups to create other outcomes. It's the same. They use the same technology. And also we can.
See when you say they, who do you mean exactly? Because you say they, so there's a plurality. It's a group. It's not singular. So you're alluding to there's a group of individuals, people who are doing this, and who do you think they are exactly?
Well, there are different factions, and all of them, they have different purposes, but they are fulfilling the same plan, which is coming from source, which is our evolution. For me, this is a test. This is a test for us to prove ourselves that we are embodying that unity consciousness. And the part in which the plot comes through are those tests in which at every moment we are capable to prove that we remember what is true.
That's
So
a very Gnostic notion, a very Gnostic idea that you're describing there.
oh really? Well,
Yes, yeah.
some people have said that to me, like I can bring, like sometimes like Gnostic teachings, like Hermetic ones, or from other secret societies, and it's just in my codes, it's like I remember, and not forcefully, because I have been something in my past lifetimes, yet because I can access to that information, and we can all do that. It's just a matter of acknowledgement of the quantum field of the space memory network and acting in coherence to access.
So when you say your other lives, your past lives. So are you talking? Are you alluding to reincarnation, or is this parallel universes? What are we talking about here?
Let's say all of that, because in the end or in the beginning, we are an infinite field of probabilities, and we are just accessing to that information. So yeah, it's I refer to both of them.
Right. Sorry. So you were describing the groups who you think are acting on our evolution for their own agenda, and they're interfering with our life, with our existence. Uh, are these groups terrestrial, interdimensional, extraterrestrial, or all of the above?
I do remember that it's all of them, because it works the same way. It's like even at the same level. Are they good guys here, helping us, supporting us? Yeah, as humans, as starseeds, as avatars, as multidimensional beings, like encrypted within this field. So yeah, it goes both ways. And
Mm.
there are, as I was saying, several groups. Like for instance, if we look at it at dimensional level, we would call them, that they call themselves the architects, and they create realities. There are different types of architects. There are ninth density architects that actually create very beautiful organic systems of reality. And there are other ones, like for instance, this coming from the sixth, that they try to replicate the organic matrices coming from the ninth dimension. So
Again, this sounds very Gnostic when we're talking about different levels of reality, dimensions, and architects. In Gnostic texts, we're talking about archons. We describe them as archons, but again, how you're describing this is very Gnostic.
yeah, I had heard that word, and how they talk about. I don't know if it's not. When it comes to Gnostics, that's how we know it now. That knowledge comes from way before,
Hmm.
and then they took it a very specific group and start shaping it, and then created a bigger society. I think all knowledges are beautiful. They are sharing a part of the information, and it's beautiful. So yeah, thank you.
I
um,
I was reading the Ashtavakra Gita not that long ago. It's in Avida, and I was comparing the verse I was reading with, I didn't mean to compare it. When I was reading it, I just thought of Genesis, because it was describing the source of creation, of existence, as light, and how that light um, radiates throughout consciousness. And it just reminded me of the biblical verse, "Let there be light," and the idea of the logos. And there are those similarities that you find. It's so pervasive throughout all religions and spirituality, whether you read the Ashtavakra Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, the Kabbalah, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, whatever it is, you find um, those similarities there.
yes, yes, and again, I think that this is related to the fact that we can actually understand the universe through one formula, or let's say three main formulas. But the thing is that through the amnesia process is like we're trying to create a million formulas, and
Mhm.
then making it really complex, when you can actually access to the whole universe through one formula, you know
Yeah.
and yeah, for instance, and this is why, it's like codes are repeated in all
Mhm.
of these teachings, like even the very same beings, like Isis and Horus, and then you have Jesus, and then you have Mary,
Mhm.
even as the way that
The
Joseph.
Trinity, you find that you're alluding to the Trinity. It's found over and over again. Whether it's in I think is it the Egyptian Book of the Dead?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
and and by this I don't mean that it's all false. What I'm saying is that, again, this reality is dictated through algorithms when we are not, when we move through autopilot, and of course there are fundamentals like the Trinity, like that's more than an algorithm, that's a fundamental blueprint, even in the form of creation of creating the 0 point energy and the singularity. You have two poles and then you reach the center. So, but yeah, it's how this reality is sustained through very specific organic fundaments in reality. you know it's like a magician. A magician needs to forcefully use some science, even if it's at an unconscious level, in order to actually sustain the level of illusion that he's conveying to the observer.
Mhm.
Well, I'm talking about the common stream magicians. There are other type of magicians that actually bend reality, but it's through the principles of the universe.
Yeah, I mean, another way of describing it is it's like five blind men trying to describe an elephant. One blind man touches its tail and describes the elephant as a small strand that wiggles around. The other one touches its tusk and describes it as a bony structure. Another one just touches its belly and describes it as a wall. Another one its leg, and describes it as a pole. But they're essentially describing the same thing, but they're just doing it from different perspectives. It's another way of looking at religion.
Yes, that's
They
a
exist
beautiful
in their own ecosystem, in their own, geography and demography, and that limits for perspective. But we're essentially describing the same thing as all other religions.
Yes, and thank you for putting it in with such a beautiful example, because, and unfortunately, that's what we get to forget when battles begin, when wars begin, because unity consciousness tells us there is an omnivision, the capability to see yourself through the eyes of everyone, to perceive through the eyes of everyone without holding an absolute truth. you know so this is why I always, when I share my information, I try to be very clear that this is the way that I perceive it, this is the way that I remember it. Because the moment that, and we are now in the in the era of Aquarius, and you have all these sharp minds uh, trying to become sovereign, and everyone is speaking their own truth. The thing is that they are fighting over that truth, and we are supposed to free ourselves through our sovereignty, not lock down ourselves by defending one truth. And that's the difference. When we defend one truth, then it's because it's not true. Truth is doesn't need to be defended, it doesn't need to be proved. I'm talking about not scientific. Of course, scientifically, it needs to be proved for other people to believe it. However, I'm talking about higher truths. It's like the sun. The sun doesn't need to go there saying, "Hey, I'm the sun and I'm illuminating a big part of the solar system." The sun just is, and it's fulfilling its task. Then, of course, we will try to find out how does it do it. But that's the other aspects of the truth.
I want to move us on a little bit to actually connects to what I was saying about different groups that could be interdimensional or extraterrestrial that interfere with our consciousness. Did you listen or watch the Joe Rogan show with Congressman Luna on the other week?
No. I have
Okay.
watched Joe Rogan's shows. They're very good, but not that one.
Right, I'm just going to play another short clip, and she's describing testimony or information she got from the congressional committees on UAPs that alluded, they described crash retrieval programs, extraterrestrial beings that they termed as biologics. But this is the Congresswoman describing the information that she's seen. So here we go.
I can also tell you, and this might sound crazy, but based on our investigations and stuff that we've seen, okay, there is definitely something that I think would rival what we know currently with physics, and a tech that potentially is out there that we don't have the ability to reproduce, because it would basically be like dropping a cell phone right off back during the time of maybe caveman. So like we just don't have the tech to develop it yet. What I can also tell you is, based on our interviews, and this has been something that you can go back and watch with the congressional hearings, but I was actually able to ask some of the witnesses, what are these things? And they keep saying interdimensional. And then when you talk about the interdimensional aspect of, are these things pre-existing, maybe outside of what we currently know as our own dimension? That stuff can kind of all sound crazy, but at the end of the day, my job as an investigator is to receive all the information, decipher it, and then ultimately, from a congressional aspect, if you do have contractors that are withholding information or operating outside of the purview of the federal government, there's budgetary issues, but there's definitely something that I can tell you with confidence that exists that we don't know how to explain currently.
So when you say that it operates outside our understanding of physics, what specifically are you saying? Like what happened?
To I guess break it down in simple terms is that I think that some of the tech that exists, that whatever these things have, these energy things have,
energy things? What do you mean?
Well, they call them
Nice.
I think there was more to that, but I just caught it. So what did you think? What do you think about that? It's sort of evidence of, the notion that we are other entities that are interfering with our consciousness and our reality. It's no longer in the domain of science fiction and metaphysics, but it is something that is physical.
Yes, I do feel that we have the capability to understand how they function when we reverse engineering through our biology. Everything, and this I tell you with confidence, not as an absolute truth, yet with plenty of confidence that whatever we want to understand about technology, it's a reverse engineering from our own biology, because we're an extension of the universe. So to some extent, there is something in our body subtly or dramatically functioning as that technology. That's how they created it. It's like, for instance, if I want to create something, the information has to be within me. Perhaps I'm aware of it or I'm not aware of it, but I'm going to translate what is within. And that's the example that I'm telling you, even with this, let's say, multidimensional beings, how they harness 0-point energy, how they harness the vacuum polarization, how they harness levitation processes, which is all connected. Everything that I have just mentioned is all connected. How can they actually go through the hologram and have this cloaking tech? Because even the mimetism is dormant in our DNA. That's the thing. When we activate it, then we have mimetic capabilities. You see trends, and I'm putting a very mundane example. You have trends in society, fashion trends in society. What is that? Mimetism. People mimetism one another. So now, if you apply that at a higher level, like cloaking tech, there are dormant chromosomes, dormant genes within our DNA that have those codes. We have very specific chromosomes in our DNA that can actually regenerate our cells at a higher level, more than what we actually or currently do. And so when she was referring to these multidimensional beings, I don't know what kind of tech they were talking about, but like just inferring, what kind of technology can these multidimensional beings have? psychics influencing reality? Yes, resonance. The universe functions through resonance. So frequency is how they use big part of the MK Ultra, or they continue to do it. Frequency through technology, brainwaves, accessing 5G, and so forth. So all that capability of influencing and interfering through the interferential wave field, which creates this reality, this simulation. This simulation is created through interferential wave field. So I would like to know more, like what kind of tech are these multidimensional beings using that you
Well,
would
I
know?
remember there was a British report that was undertaken in the 50s, and it was called the Condon Report, and it was very similar. And they reported that individuals who had encountered extraterrestrial vehicles um, experienced radiation burns or damage to their DNA.
Mm,
And in it, the description of as a UFO wasn't used much of the time. We could call them anomalous objects, orbs, stuff like that. However, the Congressional Committee, and this is more up to date, um, definitely described these objects as being physical with technology that they were attempting to reverse engineer. They even acknowledged that. So if we're talking about technology that they are at least attempting to reverse engineer, then we're describing technology that is within our realm of understanding at least, because if we have no understanding of it, then we have no basis of engineering, how to engineer it, how to reverse engineer it. So, again, a lot of it was in a skiff in a private session that wasn't public, so you couldn't, watch it. Um, but it is interesting that we're having these discussions and we're acknowledging these things. And you've got um, examples like Skinwalker Ranch, where you have portals that have been described in anomalous glowing orbs and interaction with cryptoids or whatever they're called, just strange looking entities that will interact with people and then disappear within, minutes. And that again, it is really interesting because they do allude to the notion that it is related to consciousness, that it's not something that exists outside of our reality. It is biocentric. It interacts with us and it can damage us. Hence, the whole it can damage our DNA, and that was reported in the Condon report. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what to make of it. I just find it quite interesting. I did an episode not that long ago with someone who is involved with Melinda Leslie and Misha Johnston on the whole MyLabs phenomenon in MK Ultra, and how extraterrestrial beings are often used for MK Ultra, for Project Monarch, to traumatize people in order to create distant identity states where they can destroy the mind and put it back together for control. And yeah, it's like, is the UFO a vehicle? A vehicle that can be used to interact with our consciousness, and it's became a meme in our culture, and that these organizations, these intelligence organizations, are using that meme to traumatize people. And once you have an object, a symbol that is associated with your trauma, and then it becomes pervasive and it's everywhere in society, it's like a power object, it's like a totem, and it's everywhere now. The idea of the UAP, the UFO. And what is it? What is it really? It's fascinating, I think.
It is, and this is why I believe that it's so important for us to remember, because when we remember, then all those gaps that are used to manipulate through screen memories, through a specific chain of thoughts, and so forth, can no longer be occupied because they are occupied by our own memories. No, no, enough information infiltrated actually to create a very specific distortion of that space. And also, another very important reason why do I feel and experience that it's very important for us to remember is that because then we break free from fear. We are releasing fear, and fear is actually what keeps on conducting and making all those programs so successful, because even we have other factions that their technology functions due to the fact that fear exists. But if we detach from that fear, if we start coming up from the space of love, responsibility of our divine power, then those things become senseless, because it's not like reality is going to be perfect, yet the stream in which we are bringing life and coherence through us makes them weaker and weaker and weaker. And then we are upgrading our molecular structure of water. We are creating more resonant genetic bonds. We are awakening silenced genes, and we are making life more beautiful instead of falling for those ideas, those screen realities that they are trying to imprint in our minds, because because we will be too busy in loving.
Coherence is something that's very important to you, isn't it?
Yes, because
Is,
see,
is that is that because you feel that when things are coherent, life is more beautiful?
for me, coherence is harmony. It's a level of harmony, and harmony for me is beauty. So the true beauty, that harmony. So not the one measured by a linear mind or cognitive form of thinking. So coherence brings us to the plasma body. Coherence brings us to the 0 point energy. Coherence brings us to that which sometimes we call shielding ourselves, which is just being so harmonious that nothing can enter into your field. So it's a very powerful word. It's a universe.
Are you familiar with Graham Hancock?
Yes. Graham Hancock, or who did you say?
Graham Hancock.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's very involved in the use of psychedelics in ancient civilizations or alternative history. I just want to play this one last clip, and it features Graham Hancock. He's saying something quite germane to what we were speaking about.
Okay.
I was fortunate to know the Peruvian shaman Pablo Amaringo. I did ask Pablo specifically why he is painting UFOs in his flying saucers. Literally, that's what they look like. And I said, are you telling us that we're being visited by beings from other planets? What are these flying saucers that you're depicting? And again, very matter of fact, he said, oh, well, those are vehicles for entering and leaving the spirit world. That's what he said they were. So maybe there is some physical tech that can gain access to other realms of reality.
Yeah. And, he was talking about vehicles to interact with our consciousness. And, if you hold a non-dualist consciousness-centric idea of a universe, so does that suggest that interdimensional beings are really part of us, a manifestation of us? If we live in a simulation and that and our consciousness is part of that simulation. So I've always, and again, it's a non-dualist simulation. So does that suggest that these interdimensional beings, or even God, is a part of us?
Yes, it's the holofractogramic universe talks about the holographic field, the fractal aspect of it, which is like the matrushkas, these dolls that you have the biggest vessel, then you open it, you have a smaller one, you open it, smaller one, then and so forth. That's fractality. And the gramic represents the level of energy density that is applied to each fractal and then projected holographically. So the holofractogramic reality sustents that we are part of one consciousness, higher consciousness, that source of all. So we have information of everything, just at different gradients. We have the information of all densities within, all energy densities within, all light within, the full spectrum of light within. Now, that can be translated in infinite ways. It can be translated as the Lyrans. It can be translated as the Syrians, as Merthyr, as Gimbo. It can be
Sorry,
as
the Lyrans, what's that?
like Lyrans, like beings from Lyra, you know?
Oh, a constellation?
Yes, yes,
Right.
exactly. Or as Hathorians, or as geometrical forms, light forms without any specific form, not even humanoid at all, like, and we have information of all of them embedded in our DNA, whether if it's active or inactive, it depends on who we are and which part of the puzzle are we holding for that unity to be generated. So this is the magic of it. When we tune into the universal language, geometrical form tuned into source, love, resonance, coherence, then we are capable to actually bend reality. And all those beings that we are talking about controlling and so forth end up not falling, end up resonating into the most powerful source, like the beautiful baby, exactly like that. It's like, it sounds like a baby. Now your cat sounds like a baby.
She's actually, I don't know, she's definitely trying to get noticed in the background. She might actually be being sick right now. I should lock the door when I'm making podcasts, so I don't have this issue. There isn't an episode that I have done or that I can recall doing that she hasn't been in the background in some way. Like she always tries to get noticed. Even when I'm on the phone, as soon as I'm on the phone, she starts meowing into the receiver and tries to get involved in the conversation. It is quite distracting, not just for me, but for you. So I apologize.
No, for me it was beautiful because I was just, how they say that sometimes cats can do the sound of kids. So I was listening to a kid, and I'm talking about all these, like the level of purity, how can actually cross barriers and come across barriers and actually connect heart to heart with anything. And the figure of kids come to my mind because they are the highest expression of purity. And now your beautiful cat is communicating, like giving that confirmation. So yeah, thank
So
you.
you're alluding to the purity of my cat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you know what? She is. She's getting on. She's quite old. She's 14 now, but she's a good soul. She's a good soul.
It
She
is.
really does. She really does care. I think about her family, and you know, they may not have the intelligence of children, but they are important, and they do have, they are sentient, feeling creatures. So I do care
Yes.
about Coco. But so Hancock, he was mentioning shamanism and altered states of consciousness. And altered states of consciousness is central to shamanism, and the psychic forces of destruction and reintegration is symbolized in Siberian shamanism by the bones, the animal bones they wear, or the human bones at times. In the Mexican shaman using peyote or psilocybin to achieve a psychic breakthrough. You got the Indonesian shamanistic process of gender transference, and even North American Cheyenne Indians do the gender transference thing, gender changing too. What do you think of the role of altered states in being a tool for initiation, leading to spiritual breakthrough?
I have a friend who is a quantum physicist who has been doing some research of the brain waves when people is going through psychedelics.
Mhm.
And the thing is that for me, there is this part that actually goes almost into a dormant state, which is the amygdala. I'm not saying that his research, the research of my friend, says that, but this is what I do feel, that the amygdala goes into a very dormant state, and the amygdala is the part of the brain that is actually producing the adrenaline and the cortisol, among other neurochemicals, but mainly those ones. So when you're going into survival mode, then your amygdala, it's super active, or into survival state, your amygdala is super active. So
Mhm.
when we're going into, like, when you try psychedelics, of course, there, I don't know, depending on the vision that you're having, perhaps you're going into a paranoid state, because some people go through that, then
Mhm.
your amygdala is quite active. But for most of the experiences that you can actually go, that happens, those paranoid states they happen when your emotional body is very raw. You really need to polish it, you really need to work on your emotional body. And this
Mhm.
is like the first stages of initiation into the sacred plants or the psychedelics, organically speaking of them. So then, once you have shaped your emotional body, then your amygdala will go into dormant state, and you will be able to access to higher forms of communication with those more advanced consciousnesses that are there all the time. There is this spirit or code of the ayahuasca that I love, that all the shamans that follow ancient teachings have, which is these patterns in their clothes that they are like circuits. And that's the spirit of the plant itself, the grandmother, as how they refer to it. And that spirit holds very, very specific codes from other place that is non-terrestrial. There are plants that, as far as I'm concerned, they don't come from Earth. Not even the peyote. Their codes are galactic, and this is why they help
What plants do you
leaves.
um what plants do you feel are galactic or celestial in origin in terms of how they help us with initiation?
Well, peyote,
Peyote.
ayahuasca, um, perhaps even, cambo or bufo, that comes from the venom of the, I mean, the not the venom, the sweat of a very specific frog.
Hmm.
Because when we're talking about the genetics of the frog, all forms of life have been manipulated here in Earth, their genetics. So I do believe that that also, like that sweat is full non-terrestrial due to all the genetic manipulations that have been done on frogs and other reptiles. What else? I'm not very familiar, to be honest, to the sacred.
Have you ever experimented with ayahuasca or other psychedelics?
I have experience with ayahuasca, with bufo, and the thing about bufo and DMT is it's the same. Like the substance that they get from the frog's sweat is the same has the same neurochemical composition that the DMT that we create when we die, or
Yes,
when we
it's
are.
an endogenous source. Sorry.
Yes.
Uh,
No, go ahead.
I remember reading Rick Strassman's The Spirit Molecule, something like 15 years ago, and it was described how women, when they're during childbirth, release endogenous DMT into their system. And also, you're describing how near-death experiences there is endogenous DMT released into um, our bodies then, and we can hypothesize why that is. Is it done undertaken by our bodies in order for us to cope with those really stressful experiences? Um, I just find really interesting. The connection between initiation ritual, the sacrament of these substances, because they were involved in sacrament. And again, when you have the intelligence agencies, such as like the CIA, who utilized like LSD and amphetamine and many other drugs, you get characters we could mention like Sidney Gottlieb or Jolly West, who would use these drugs like dark sorcery, and there was no sacrament or appreciation for setting. And when the relevance and the value and importance of setting, environment, and sacrament isn't given to these substances, it does have a destructive effect. And it reminds me of actually Carlos Castaneda. Have you read any Carlos Castaneda's books here?
I haven't read them, but I know who he is. I have heard about him.
For
Yes.
Vernon, Castaneda is a graduate in anthropology at UCLA, and in the 1960s, while gathering information about medicinal herbs, he encountered a Yaqui Indian called Don Juan, and he wrote an excellent book called A Yaqui Way of Knowledge, I think, and it's his experiences on peyote, Jimson weed, confronting spiritual entities, the spirit of the plants that he was using, and it's an equal to anything that Huxley has written, that Leary has written, or Burroughs. It is a phenomenal text, and I would recommend it to to anyone that is interested in psilocybin or initiation, because we were talking about Christen or Christos. And have you ever heard of a man called Amin Hillman?
Yes. Yes.
Right, have you seen any of his videos?
What I do to feel is that our biology has the capability to generate like many neurochemicals that when you conjugate them, they can actually generate on you the liberation or the opening of the claustrum, which is that energetically speaking, the opening of it, which is the biggest neuron that we have, the claustrum, and that the opening of it, the energetic opening of it, or communing with it, in a different way due to the neurochemicals that we are generating within, can actually break through the level, the way in which our multidimensional body is in this reality in order to access to hyperspace. So that's mainly what I know about what uh, this elixir that you're talking about, the Christos, is about. Opening that, connecting that level that in our fontana that is already like physically closed, is energetically opening it and then accessing, opening the claustrum and accessing to the altar of God, which is a very symbolic way to in which some, let's say, when we talk about the stars, there are very specific stars that play a very important role in our holographic vessel, because the level of how they communicate in pulses with our holographic vessel, you can actually reach very high forms of manifestation in this reality. So the altar of God is the Pegasus cube, and yeah, that would be like a way, like a very good topic for another um, show. Unfortunately, I will have to go in a bit.
Right.
know,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I actually just realised it's been going on for over 100 minutes now. Can I just ask you one last question before we wrap this up?
sure.
I've heard you mention black holes that exist in the Earth and in the Sun. Can you just describe that for me? Describe what you mean by that?
Yeah, sure. There is a black hole in the sun that would be about the size of Mercury, the planet Mercury.
Right.
And the thing is that the solar, so like the solar model that right now the like astrophysics have, the community of astrophysics have, is not consistent to the amount of energy that the sun emits. We're talking about, let's say, teravolts, that in order to create that magnitude of teravolts, the amount of teravolts that the sun is creating, it the sun itself wouldn't be able to generate it. It needs to be coming from another source, and that source is proportional to a black hole. And let's remember that a black hole is bringing energy from elsewhere. So it's not the black hole itself and the vacuum fluctuations that it is constantly generating, or the vacuum polarization that it is generating. It's the energy that it's bringing from another place. So there is a black hole network that connects to like the sun's black hole, the Earth's black hole, and other black holes that are all over the system, like Sagitta in the galaxy and the solar system. Well, the closest is in Sagitta, but so far known. But for instance, they are coming now to acknowledge that every star has a black hole. We know that the sun is a black hole, and you can ask yourself, well, but is the Earth a star? Then why would it have a black hole? And the thing is that we need to interconnect to everybody through somewhere. And even if we say that the protons are tiny black holes, and I'm not talking about the black holes can be quite stable due to how they compose themselves. They compose through plasma. There are layers of plasma just to get to the event horizon of a black hole that makes it really stable. So now when we take into consideration, there are these very tiny bodies that there are the magneto hydrodynamic modes that they are located in what we call the solar corona, and they are the ones that create this quite coherent matrices that then are communing and connecting with, for instance, the Earth and other planets, and then they are generating what we would call the aurora borealis. So all of these amounts of energy, gamma waves, X-rays, the tiny black holes with the dark spots in the sun, all of that and the amount of energy that is coming from it, there needs to be a black hole at the center. And even we will see like the black sun depicted by the Aryans, that they are showing to the black hole. They were trying to reach out to the black hole at the center of the area, because before and now by other races, galactic races, they travel through the Earth, through the sun's black hole into the center of the Earth through that black hole, because there are networks. This is why a lot of spaceships come from inner Earth all the way to through.
So it's you're saying the black hole is a portal?
Yes, actually, black holes and wormholes use the same tech. Black holes are connected through wormholes. Wormholes are present in every quantum connection. That's how the quantum entanglement happens. Wormholes at different scales.
And you think that you said Aryans earlier? Are you describing the ancient civilization that roamed the plains of Eurasia? Do you believe there is an extraterrestrial basis to their existence on Earth?
Yes, I definitely believe that there are different bases in inner Earth, and I will love to talk about that. Vincent,
Sorry.
Yes,
Is there anything you would like to promote or tell the audience about?
Yes, I would love to promote our next show, because then we can talk about all these other topics that are very interesting, and I would love to keep on sharing them with you, Vincent. I truly do. The thing is that I really need to go, but you can find me in my Facebook, Yssah YouTube channel, Yssah Libien, or Yssah Libien, how it's pronounced differently in Spanish and in English, so I want you to grasp it. And also in my website, www.acna-hunuk.com. You can also write to me to my email, omnivision.hunuch, HUNUH, @outlook.com. That's how you and I communicated, Vincent. And so that's how you can contact me.
Well, Yssah, it's been great having you on, and thanks for your time and explaining everything to us so well. And it's been a joy having you on. So if we speak again, I'm sure it'll be equally or even more interesting.
It will, and let's keep in touch. I will give you my phone number, and we can keep in touch and plan on the next show. It was such a pleasure to be with you, Vincent. You're a big mind. I know all the knowledge that you have, and thank you so much for your invitation, and looking forward to talking to you again. Thank you, and thank you to your audience.
Thank you. Right. Goodbye.
And goodbye until the next time. Thank you, and thank you to your beautiful cat.
Oh, and is it Boa Noite via con Dios?
Oh, nice. I understood you. Wow, vaya con Dios. Thank you. Thank you. Sending a big hug, heart to heart. Thank you. Until next time. Bye.
Well, that was fun having Yssah on. Hope to speak to her again. And if you enjoyed, don't forget you can donate by Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal. And until next time, I'll see you later.
Gold-pressed platinum, slip strips and bars. If you ever find some, you can lose it in quarks. Get a rack to Gino, spin the double wheel. Order a black hole, just depends how you feel. Yeah, it just depends how you feel. Go press platinum, you know it's a gas. Mon vomits it up into a tiny little glass. Liquid platinum, more you amass. Better than bronze, cobalt, silver, nickel or brass. Silver, nickel or brass. We're living in a high society, living on station. Part of the alliance, the United Federation. Picking up the pieces from the cardi occupation. You could be a Klingon with a genetic mutation, a symbiont Tandorian, a tortured Irish curly-haired Caucasian.